Hello, everyone. Chip Paul here for Chip Talks Health. Today, we're going to talk about something really cool, something really interesting. I'm going to provoke your mind a little bit, I hope, and give you some of the things that we think about here at Chip Talks Health, some of the things that run through our minds, let's say. So, I'll give you some of my learning, let's say, as an experience. But what we're going to do, this is really cool. We're going to compare kind of what goes on in your gut to what goes on with plants. Okay. So it's kind of a cool idea that, let's say, we have to interface, let's say, with the earth at a certain level in order to survive. So 2 or 3 years ago, if you would ask me, hey, Chip, do we need a biome? I would have said, I don't think so. I mean, in what world do you need fleas and ticks all over you? I mean, that's the way that I would have viewed the biome several years ago, as pathogens, as bacteria that's in you that shouldn't be in you, bacteria that's not necessarily helpful, but bacteria that potentially could be harmful. And certainly one of the things that's wrong with us right now, if you've watched this channel, you know that we talk about this a lot, are, pathogenic infections. So this, having this bacterial biome that apparently we're supposed to have, and then we have all these pathogens that we know are part of the disease profile. So to me, those two, that seem dangerous, having you have a biome, right? So a biome would be, potentially on the edge of being pathogenic at any time, meaning harmful to you. So that's the way that I viewed the biome in the past. And I've done a lot of research on, can you live without a biome? And do we, right now with our food supply, I mean, we kind of have to supplement for essential nutrients. But, is the biome, let's say, critical to how you build or absorb essential nutrients? And so I had, kind of assumed that you really didn't need a biome, that is part of kind of where we're at right now. Well, that may not be the case. I have to admit now, I have to admit that potentially I was, wrong about that particular line of thinking or inquiry. And that's the cool thing about being a researcher or a scientist is, we postulate things. So we think things might be true. And then we proceed to prove or disprove those theories. And if you're a ethical and, good scientist, you're going to, even your, most pristine theory, you're going to subject it to lots of poking holes in it and, making sure that it holds water, let's say, under lots of different scientific scrutiny. So you don't need a biome does not hold up under scientific scrutiny. You need a biome, but we're gonna get into why and potentially draw some analogies that might be really cool. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna watch a video. So bear with me for 2 minutes while we plow through this little video about plants. Okay, so 2 minutes, minute 45.
Every step we take lies an invisible world hidden in plain sight, a universe not of stars and galaxies, but of microscopic life. It's the soil microbiome, billions of organisms working silently in every handful of earth. Just 1 teaspoon of healthy soil can hold more living organisms than there are people on the planet. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, an entire web of life beneath our feet, shaping the very world above. We don't see it. We rarely think about it. Yet, without this hidden community, plants would not grow. Rivers would not flow the same. The air itself would be different. In fact, without the soil microbiome, life on Earth as we know it could not exist. These tiny engineers recycle nutrients, store carbon, filter water, and protect plants from disease. Their networks, like the threads of underground fungi, connect roots in ways that resemble the internet. Scientists call it the Wood Wide Web. Plants whisper to each other through this fungal highway, sending nutrients and even warning signals. And here's the astonishing part. This world beneath us has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years, long before humans planted their first seed. The soil microbiome has always been Earth's quiet caretaker. But in our rush to feed billions, to build cities, and to control nature, we've forgotten about it. We've plowed it, poisoned it, and left it exposed. And today, this hidden world is under threat like never before. This story begins with something too small to see.
Okay, so we'll leave it there. So it's obviously the video goes into a lot more detail about that. But the big thing is our modern agricultural practices have changed soil quality. And I'm sure you've heard things like, a strawberry today is maybe a tenth, of the strawberry of 1930 or 1920. So what happened? How did we screw up, let's say, our soil and our agriculture? Well, we wrecked the biome. We wrecked the biome. We wrecked the biome. So things want to grow in soil that's living, that's alive. And we've all heard about living soil, and that requires, earthworms and bacteria and spaces and fungi to kind of extend out, and nutrient sensing, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes in soil that's alive. Okay, all kinds of stuff that goes in soil that's alive, and that is necessary for a plant to grow. Okay, so a plant, well, it's not 100% necessary. So think about what we've done since World War II. Before World War II, we might have had a 2-furrow plow or a 4-furrow plow, or we might have been, still pulling a plow behind a horse. But we weren't doing the modern agricultural thing of, 8 or 12 furrows, behind a plow. So we're just completely, wrecking the topsoil every season. And then after World War II, we had a bunch of ammonium nitrate left over from bomb making. And somebody had the bright idea to, hey, this might be a good fertilizer. And so they, began to sprinkle it on crops. And guess what? The crops grew. But guess what also happened? You're killing the living soil with ammonium nitrate. You're suffocating the soil. You're not allowing the soil to be alive like it should be. And so this is what has hurt really the value of our food right now, is these modern agricultural practices where you get a plant that looks okay, he looks green and he looks healthy, but he's not producing at the same level, and he's not as healthy as a plant that's grown in living soil. So we have a nonprofit, we have a gentleman who's a soil expert who has come and talked to us about soil, and it occurred to me that, well, you have this idea in alchemy of kind of as above, so below. And if you look at kind of how that works, again, that's how, let's say, spirit interfaces with earth. That's how, our spirituality potentially interface with this earth. Are you built to live on different planets? Potentially, but you might have to interface in a different way with that planet than we do now. So right now we're used to interfacing with this planet in the way that we breathe, but certainly in the things that we eat. But there has to be a kind of a point of air and earth, let's say, together, where these things coexist. And that in us appears to be the microbiome. Okay, it appears to be the microbiome. Now, why is this important? Well, we know in soil, you have to have certain kinds of bacteria, and you have to have you have to have earthworms, and you have to have certain kinds of funguses. So there's an ecosystem that goes on inside a soil that really helps plants, grow, stay alive, get nitrogen from the soil, better ways to water, all kinds of things like that. So does that happen inside of you? Well, it turns out, yeah, it does. And this is where it gets really kind of cool, is that there's different bacterial guilds. We'll call them guilds. I wrote a white paper, so I'll put the graphic up with the white paper along with this video. But there are bacteria, and we're just calling them guilds for lack of it, bacterial groups, you could call them, but bacterial guilds, because it's kind of a cool name. They do something, they are at something, they are trying to help you in a certain way. So it turns out there's 4 of these different types of guilds. So what is the purpose, let's say, of your microbiome? Well, when we eat carbohydrates especially, but carbohydrates, let's say in grains and some resistant starches, those things are hard to break down. Those things don't break down easily at all. You can think of it like a piece of wood, right? So some of the carbohydrates we eat are kind of like a piece of wood, and they don't break down easily. What does break down easily? Dietary fats and protein. So you're kind of a dietary fat and protein machine. Carbohydrates are not essential, but they are a good way to, let's say, get sugars. They are a good way to get some calories. They are a good way to get some vitamins potentially. So they're useful. Carbohydrates are useful and, non-essential. You don't need them. You can go the rest of your life and never eat a carbohydrate, but we can still get some good goodies from them. And in times of scarcity, if I can't find fat and if I can't find protein, then damn, I'm going to survive by eating carbohydrates. And you have to have a way to do that. And you can survive for a little while on the sugars in carbohydrates. So how do you break them down? Well, you've got to have help, right? We have a process somewhat for breaking down carbohydrates, but it's not as advanced as our process for breaking down protein and our process for breaking down dietary fats. The fat is critical to your machine, to you as a vehicle. So if you can't break down fat, you're basically going to be dead. You can't function as a machine. Carbohydrates, again, are not essential, so they're not, let's say, as critical to you, but you still can use some stuff out of them, so you got to break them down, right? So one class of guild, let's say there's 4 guilds, all right? So one guild has to do with being able to enzymatically break down these very complex fibers. And again, we do this all the time in industrial processes. How do you make wood pulp? Well, you use, enzymes and things to break down that wood into pulp. And similar things happen inside of you, but you've got to have those enzymes to be able to degrade resistant starches, complicated, carbohydrates, very hard to, let's say, digest things. So the first group is these guys that degrade these fibers. Now, there's interdependence between these guilds, because if I don't have group 1, then I'm not going to be able to feed the other groups, because they're going to eat some of these complex carbohydrates and some of these breakdowns from guild number 1. So the second group of bacteria are butyrate producers. So butyrate is a very important substance in our bodies. It's a short chain fatty acid. It is important to gut junctions. So again, we want to be able to absorb food in our gut. And so that takes some, let's say, permeability. So things have to move in and out, but we want that to be a real tight process. We don't want a bunch of funk and bacteria in our blood system. Well, that's what butyrate does. So butyrate helps with the cells that form these tight junctions, and also helps to tighten the junctions. So if you have leaky gut syndrome, you have a lack of butyrate producers, likely. And again, this can be fixed. It can be fixed with diet, in a week. But you have to understand the whole system. Okay, so butyrate producers help us build these tight junctions, tight gut junctions, and they're really important to supporting, let's say, the cells that do this. They give them energy and all that. So failure of these guys, you become more permeable. And hello, autoimmunes, hello, things like that. Because once you get a chunk of strep or bacteria in your blood system, it can go grab your thyroid or a bunch of other stuff and cause autoimmune disease. So that is basically how we get autoimmune disease, is leaky gut. And leaky gut, again, can be caused by a lack of butyrate producers. All right, so the third guild area is, I've got lots of notes. This one isn't just a Chip can do off the top of his head. So, and I'll go to my stack of stuff here in a second. But right now I'm at my whiteboard going through my notes. But anyway, the third category of guild is lactate producers, okay? So lactate producers control pH. Lactate is an acid, and it's a byproduct of certain cellular processes. So cells can run on glucose and amino acids, or they can run on dietary fats. And that's kind of the AMPK switch. That's a really important switch. But if cells are running on glucose, they will output lactic acid. And what does that do? Well, lactic acid has a low pH. And so that will decrease the pH in an area. And that's how you control microbes. That's how you control bad guys. That's how you control pathogens. So you want these guys in our gut. You want them to produce lactate. That lowers the pH, and that creates basically a bad environment for bad guys. So you're creating a hostile environment with these lactate producing bacteria. And then the last category are mucus specialists. Okay. So they're going to go in, and mucus you could think of as like topsoil. Okay. It's alive. It's got antibodies. It needs to be alive. It needs to have antibodies in it. It needs to have these guys in it that are helping manage, remove stuff that shouldn't be there, autophagy stuff out of there. But if these guys overgrow or they're constrained, if you're not giving them enough food, like if Guild 1 isn't passing these guys enough food, they'll start eating your mucus, and you don't want them to do that because, again, that's going to cause other dysfunctions. So we have 4 very important categories of bacteria in our biome that do very specific things that we need. Okay. So let's go through some things that we do right now, like behaviors that we do, and how this affects those guilds. So right now, one of the things that we do, and again, I would have thought that this was proper before I started doing this research. I would have thought, well, I'm going to pick my one really nutrient-rich meal, and I'm going to eat that every day. I mean, I'm going to make sure I get everything that I need in that meal, but every day I'm just going to eat that one meal. Well, that's like monocropping. So that's like trying to grow the same thing again and again and again in soil that continues to get more and more and more and more depleted. We don't have the diversity that we need to be able to deal with even the stuff that we're eating. Okay. So your bacterial biome, your gut biome is going to trend toward what you eat. Okay. And what we eat configures this biome. So if we're just eating one thing, we're going to have a lack of diversity in our biome, and we're not going to have real robust guilds. So those guilds aren't going to be real robust. And that's ultimately not optimal. Let's just say it's not necessarily going to hurt you, but it's not as good as you can get. And don't we want to be, I want to strive toward perfect. I'm kind of a perfectionist. So I always want to strive toward perfect, but I want to be as healthy as I can possibly be. Well, I can't be if I'm eating one meal and one meal only. Okay. So what else do we do? Well, a lot of us have a high simple carbohydrate intake. Okay. And so what does this do? Well, this is just like synthetic nitrogen. So again, if I just, I'm throwing synthetic nitrogen on soil, that soil is going to have a lot of resources, right? So it's going to have a lot of food. It's going to have a lot of things to do, but it might burn up, in the sun. It's too much, right? It's too much resource. I might get real high output and cause things to grow too fast and other things to not grow fast enough, which might cause some mutations and things like that. So not what I want to do. So us eating just a carbohydrate meal is analogous to that very thing. So resistant starches are another very important part of our, let's say, biome and potential food supply. So if we're not eating resistant starches, that's like losing organic material in the soil. So that's like a depleted soil, a soil that's, you've grown stuff in for 6 or 7 seasons and you haven't really done anything to reinvigorate that soil or make it alive again. So that is without resistant starches, that's what happens. So we all need resistant starches, and resistant starches are what help the butyrate guys. So they're what help the butyrate guys. A reduced polyphenol intake. So what are polyphenols? Polyphenols are the things that make blueberries blue or strawberries red, raspberries red. So they're the color elements in fruit mainly. They're also in vegetables, but they're mainly in fruit. Polyphenols are very important in basically creating that diversity. So that diversity in the biome Polyphenols super help that a lot. The other thing that we do is we constantly eat, so we don't really have a rhythm. And you can think of this as like, plants need a watering cycle and a dry cycle. You can't continually water a plant. If you do, that plant's going to drown. And that's kind of what we're doing to ourselves now by continuously feeding. So your body wants to eat, basically deal with the food that you ate, and then have a rest period of, doing other things. When we eat, we go into a degraded, low energy state for like 5 hours. If you'll notice after you eat lunch, if you eat lunch, again, after you eat lunch, about an hour after you eat, you're going to get really tired, brain fog, not be as sharp, let's say, as you were right before you ate lunch. That's because eating is consequential. So, and it's also intentional. We need to be intentional about what we eat and when we eat, because it is so consequential. So eating a lot over all day is really, really hard on your body. Packing that into a single time frame, and that might be a noon to 6, that might be like I eat in a 4 p.m. to about 7 or 8 p.m. window. People eat in different windows, but the smaller you can make that window, the better. Now, there always are some caveats to this, like, there are certain disease states that you don't want to intermittent fast in. Again, if you're malnourished, it's more important to kind of get you nourished first and then teach you about intermittent fasting. So there's always some, let's say, warnings and dangers with intermittent fasting. But again, constant feeding is going to hurt you, right? So you want to pack your meals into more of a window. All righty, continuing on with our stack of stuff. So let's talk about some of the things that we see in our clinic. And again, if you've been in our clinic, or if you've listened to me talk before, you've heard lots of these words before, but almost all of us are infected. In fact, I would say, all of us are infected. I mean, there might be a 0.00001 guy out there somewhere. It isn't me. I'm still getting infected with stuff all the time, and most people do. But, what I hope to do is move us from, super infected, super easy to infect, up out of that to barely able to infect, not real susceptible. And, we do that with essential nutrients, basically. I mean, we can kill stuff that's, affecting you. But ultimately, we build that resilience and that strength back, your border wall, so to speak, with essential nutrients. So essential nutrients are absolutely critical to our health. And, to think we can't get down the road without oil and gas is insanity. We know in our car, we have to have oil and gas, and we know what happens when we try to put sugar, baby oil, or whatever in our car. We get a bad result. Well, guess what happens when we put non-essential nutrients in ourselves or deny ourselves essential nutrients? Again, we're not going to get down the road, are we? And we all get infected with things. That's the consequence of not taking your essential nutrients. And then past that, we require symptoms of disease, let's just say. So there's a whole cause, symptom, whole bunch of stuff in here, right, that happens. And biome is part of that, can affect that, affects your immune system, affects how you deal with stuff, affects how you absorb essential nutrients and essential resources. So it's a super critical interface between this outside world and inside of you, just like soil is a critical interface between plants, outside world, and what they bring inside of themselves. Okay, you guys get the idea? I'm sure you get the idea. I love this analogy. I love the whole as above, so below stuff. Okay, so let's walk through some things that we see in our clinic and tie these back to basically biome things. Okay, so we see a lot of Lactobacillus acidophilus overgrowth. What does that cause? Well, if you bloat, let's say right after you eat, or if you bloat when you eat fermented food or carbohydrates or resistant starches, you likely have a Lactobacillus acidophilus overgrowth. If you're carrying too much weight, or if you're type 2 diabetic, usually it's Lactobacillus acidophilus overgrowth that underpin those things. If you address the overgrowth, you address those symptoms. So, if I want to lose weight, one of the things and do that naturally without a bunch of pharmaceutical drugs, and again, we've all tried to lose weight, right, with diets and all this kind of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. This is different. We're going to address your weight problem through your bacterial infection that we know is causing you to have a weight problem. God doesn't want anybody to be overweight, right? He didn't build you to be overweight. He didn't build you to carry a bunch of weight. But in our society, there are certain environmental and dietary cues that we get that trend us that way. And we also we drop our border walls, we become infected, and there's certain infections that, want to eat more than your tissue, right? So they're going to make you hungry. They can blunt your GLP-1 and all of your satiety hormones. And so, they can blunt out all your satiety signals and then cause you to still be hungry when you're not. And that's going to obviously cause you to gain weight, and you will continue to gain weight until you address that infection. All the GLP-1s in the world won't fix that, okay? All the semaglutides, I don't care how natural and wonderful they are, it ain't going to fix that infection problem, okay? So anyway, if you're on some kind of GLP-1 or whatever and you're not losing weight, then I'm basically telling you why. And again, come to us, we'll address the infection, you'll lose weight. It's that easy. But anyway, this lactobacillus acidophilus overgrowth. So what would be an analogy of that? Like what would, if we go to the soil, what would be an analogy? What would be a fertilizer bloom in simplified soil? So it's soil that's been degraded, but now we've thrown a little nitrogen on it. Now we have this fertilizer bloom that's not going to last very long and not going to be supportive, but it's a, high energy bloom. So SIBO and lactobacillus acidophilus overgrowth really is part of SIBO. But SIBO can be caused by other overgrowths that get up in the small intestine and up in the upper stomach. SIBO is stuff that should stay in your biome, but that crawls out because it's got a lot of nutrients and it's, got a lot of space, let's say, to rock and roll. So again, what would SIBO be like in a soil analogy? Waterlogged, poorly draining soil. Okay, so that's what SIBO is like. So we're overwatering a situation, we're providing too much, and it's just bogged down, and it's not working the way that it should. So that's what SIBO is. H. pylori. So we see a lot of H. pylori. I would, if you're wondering, am I infected with H. pylori? I would just assume yes, you are infected with H. pylori. Most people are. H. pylori is what causes pancreatic cancer. It can cause colon cancer. It can cause breast cancer sideways. It is one wicked bad bug, and all of us are very susceptible to this bug right now. And again, if you go to pharma protocols, it's just going to make it worse and make you more susceptible to cancers and things like that. But anyway, and again, I've got to be careful what I say. I don't want to make claims. It is reported with most people that we see pylori in, that gets better within a week or 2 weeks. Okay. I know that seems impossible if you're one of those people out there that I have to sleep standing up and take a tablespoon of baking soda every time I eat. But yeah, within a week will make you feel better. Reported to make you feel better. No claims. All right. H. pylori colonization. He likes to be, so what would this paralyze? What would an analogy be? In soil, it would be colonization of degraded topsoil. So this would be like trying to plant something in a furrowed field that's been furrowed and furrowed and furrowed and furrowed for years and years and years and years. Again, it can happen, and if it does happen, then it's a failure of that system's protective ecology. All right, so barrier failure, we talk a lot. You're going to hear me talk a lot about, building a, let's say, Trump border wall, building that strong border wall to protect your insides from your outsides. So in barrier failure, and barrier failure is happening to all of us right now. It's just we're in different stages of barrier failure, and that's the way we view disease. I don't care what the medical pharmaceutical system, what label they put on your symptoms. We just look at everything as barrier failure. So if you're at a stage 5 barrier failure, you're going to have a lot of symptoms. They could be, all manner of symptoms. You're way more susceptible to cancer. You're infected with stuff, and there's no way you can not be infected with stuff because your barriers have failed. As we walk you out of that, again, stage 4 barrier failure, you're less likely to get cancer. Stage 3, you're way less likely. Stage 2, you're likely not going to get it. Stage 1, you'll probably never get cancer. So we've just viewed disease in this barrier failure way. But a barrier failure as to a soil analogy would be erosion and collapse of topsoil. So it's just, everything is failing. You've got runoff, all their topsoil is going down into the river there. You don't have living soil. You've just got a poor situation. And honestly, if you look at the state of our agriculture and the state of us, that's pretty much right where we're at. So, all right. So autoimmune activation, what would that look like? Well, that's collapse of regulatory balance in the ecosystem. Our susceptibility, can't talk this morning for some reason, our susceptibility to parasites is something like a raw, bare, exposed soil that's really kind of going to get invaded by everything. And again, that has to do with barriers. All right, so we want to support our guilds. So how do we support our guilds? How do we support these 4 guilds that we've talked about? Well, first of all, we have to rotate our crops and we have to mix our planting. So it used to be that if you were a farmer, you got paid by the government to rotate your crops and mix your planting. I don't know if that still happens or not, but that's the same thing that we need to do inside of us. So always essential nutrients. We always need to be concerned with our essential nutrients, number 1. And for most of us, we have to supplement for essential nutrients. We just do right now. But then past that, you want a big diversity in meals. So you don't want to just eat the same thing all the time. That is not going to promote, let's say, a real diverse and strong and functional guild. All right, so number 1 thing, diversity of input. All right, so number 2 thing is resistant starch inclusion. So we've got to have some resistant starch. And what is resistant starch? That's cooked or peeled potatoes or rice, legumes, so root vegetables, and green bananas are really good resistant starch. And these feed the butyrate producers. So if you got leaky gut, then again, this is for you. And this is going to help you build back up your protective mechanisms and close those gut junctions. All right. There's other ways to deal with leaky gut, again, but this is the most natural and dietary way to deal with leaky gut. All right, so the third thing, so resistant starches is what we just covered. That helps butyrate. That'll close up the gut junctions. The next area is polyphenol-rich foods. And again, these are going to be things like berries, herbs, spices, colored things. Tea has a lot of polyphenols in it. Coffee has a lot of polyphenols in it. Chocolate has a lot of polyphenols in it. So go get you some tea, coffee, chocolate, or whatever, but again, eating a dessert, that's a coffee chocolate dessert. Is that bad? No, it can be really good as long as it doesn't have a bunch of sugar in it. Okay. So without sufficient polyphenol input, the system loses important regulatory mechanisms and becomes more prone to imbalance. So our whole guild structure really relies on these polyphenols in order to be robust. And this would be, plant analogy would be root, signals that kind of come out of the plant's roots and how they know that I'm in a sufficient environment or not sufficient environment. All right, the next area, and this is an essential nutrient. So protein is an essential nutrient. It's something that you have to have, but you can't build a mucin without protein. It's a protein. You can't build, let's say, that topsoil layer without adequate protein. So the soil analogy here is maintaining the root system. So you can't, maintain anything. You can't maintain any ability, let's say, to absorb nutrients or understand kind of what you're grabbing without protein. And protein, is part of every cell. It's part of every receptor in cells. It's a super important essential nutrient. There's 9 essential protein or amino acids that come from protein. If you eat animal meat, if you eat 4 ounces of animal meat, you're getting the 9 in adequate quantity. The problem is there's 7 conditional amino acids. And so we can get all 9, but not basically build the 7 in certain conditions. And most of us have those conditions. So we're not building the 7. We need to supplement with collagen. Collagen. You can't get enough collagen. So 15 to 20 grams of collagen a day for you. All right. Got to have collagen. All right. Last area is rhythmic eating. So again, we want to be intentional about when and how our food is consumed. The perfect time to eat is kind of 1 to 3 p.m. And then really we should take a little siesta. And then we get up and we're ready to rock and roll in the evening. So you kind of have 2 periods of productivity. And this is just the way your body works with circadian rhythms and energy and, focus and all that. But you have a productive period when we first wake up, and then till about, 1 o'clock. You're actually working on your liver between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. And this is by the sun. It doesn't really matter what the clock says, but by the sun. So 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. by the sun, you're working on your liver. Okay. You're working on your liver. So you don't really want to eat then, because again, you're going to take away what you're trying to do for your liver and work on your food. At 1 o'clock seems to be about the best time to eat, between about 1 and 3. I think we're working on our digestive anyway during that time. So it just fits. And taking a nap or something like that after you eat is pretty normal. I mean, so if you look at how the Latin culture with their siestas, that's works with you better than how we eat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner in Western cultures. So rhythmic eating, very important, when you eat. The other thing that's really important, and again, this isn't essential, fermented foods aren't essential, but fermented foods support the guild and they support your ability to pull in what is essential. So fermented foods are very important. They basically are, the soil analogy there is microbial inoculation. So these fermented foods support lactate producers, support basically the pH, the things that control pathogens in our biome. And then the last thing is really avoiding oversimplification. So again, we want to eat diverse. We want to eat diverse. So the more diversity you can put in your diet, again, if you're let's say supplementing for essential nutrients, and this is what we do, this is what Cindy and I do. So we supplement for our essential nutrients. Honestly, past that, it doesn't really matter what you eat. You're getting everything that you need. So now let's eat for this biome. Let's try to optimize. If I want to optimize me, I got to have essential nutrients, and then I got to begin to eat for this biome. And if I'm eating for this biome, again, it's a give and take thing. So it's going to help me, and I'm going to help it. Anyway, I'll throw this back up here. I love this graphic. So I'll put this graphic. I'll make this graphic available with the podcast. And we'll also make the white paper available with the podcast. So if you're interested, you can download that white paper. And you can always go to, let's do this. Yeah, there we go. learn.numetics.com. So if you're want to get more information about what we're doing, learn.numetics.com. And I'll always have my white papers up there. You have to give me your email address, but you can get all the white papers you want. So learn.numetics.com. And if you're concerned that your biome may be out of whack, this is what we do. So, set up an appointment, give us a call. We consult on this all the time. We help people with these issues all the time. If you're in the Oklahoma City area or in Oklahoma, we do all kinds of mobile clinics. We might come to your location. Our supplement company called TrueMedix, TrueMedx, is online. So you can find that online at truemedix.com. You can also find our clinic online at neighborlywellness.com. Anyway, we'll leave it. And again, lots of podcasts out there. If you found this one, you'll find the rest of them. We talk about a lot of things that have to do with your health. We talk about God. We talk about natural processes. We talk about ways to get back to nature. but to optimize you and to optimize your health. Anyway, we'll leave it there. We'll see you guys back next week, or it might even be tomorrow, for another exciting version of Chip Talks Health. See you guys.